What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down how you guys can go out and dominate your ESPN fantasy football drafts. So just like I did in yesterday's Yahoo video, I dove into the ESPN platform rankings, looked for some of the best player values, looked at some positions you should be targeting at different points in the draft. I'm going to present some overall guidelines, not things you have to follow rigidly, but just some overall steps, some main ideas that I think can help build some solid rosters. And then I will be diving into a couple of different mock drafts, showing you the teams you can put together on ESPN in different places within the draft. And so I started off by comparing my personal top 150 rankings with the ESPN player rankings. Now, I could have compared it to their ADP, but I do think when you're getting into your home leagues, like your league mates are going to have that draft board sorted by the ESPN player rankings that are just automatically set. So I did choose the rankings. I'm going to link that sheet in the description if you guys want to take a look at it. I'll also link my rankings there, which I'll update every few days, free for you guys, completely free. You can just download the Google Sheet. And I actually think this year ESPN's rankings are the sharpest that I can remember, but there's certainly still some value that you guys can exploit this year in your drafts. And so I want to start off by looking at the running back position. And I think when we're looking at the elite running backs, the guys going in the first round and a half, I think they're just slightly pushed up. There's only one running back that I'm actually ahead of ESPN on, and that would be Jahmyr Gibbs. One spot lower on Saquon, even with McCaffrey. 3 spots lower on Genti, a spot lower on Achane, 4 spots lower on JT, and then 6 spots lower on Josh Jacobs. So not super prioritizing running back there, but I'm not going to pretend like me being, 1 or 2 spots lower is a massive deal. But I do think there's a notable difference in how I view the guys going in the second half of round 2, getting into round 3, where I think running back does start to become a value, and you can get some really nice picks in this range. I'm kind of shocked that Derrick Henry is ranked at number 19 on ESPN. Typically ESPN, Yahoo, Derrick Henry is going to be ranked way ahead of where I have him. And I think at player 16, I might be still below consensus. But on ESPN, he's coming in here as their 19th ranked player. He's probably going to go ahead of that, but still something I think is interesting. Bucky Irving, I have him 2 spots higher than ESPN. Chase Brown, I have him 4 spots higher. Even on Kyron, and then this James Cook, Amarian Hampton, Kenneth Walker tier. I think all 4 of those running backs are in a very similar range, and so I'm higher on ESPN on all 3 of those running backs. And this is something I'll talk about with the wide receiver position. But when we're getting into round 3, I'm really looking at everything but wide receiver. I'm interested in elite tight end. I'm interested in elite quarterback. I'm interested in some of these running back options, really fading the wide receivers in that range. And then I think potentially the most shocking thing with ESPN's rankings is that the mid-round running back values are actually pretty solid. Typically on ESPN, you want to get your running backs early because the value just completely tanks. A lot of these, mid-round running backs get really pushed up. And that's not the case. I'm not in on all these guys. Don't love Kamara, Chuba, Connor at their current prices. And when I saw those guys kind of going mid-round 4, I figured it would just continue throughout the rest of the draft. But then you start to see some really nice values. I think Travion Henderson is a nice pick. I've really moved Breece Hall down, but I still think he's a value where he's going. Don't love DeAndre Swift, but I'm ahead of ESPN on Dave Montgomery, Aaron Jones, Tony Pollard, RJ Harvey, Isaiah Pacheco. So I don't think there's this extreme need to draft, super early running backs, because there are some potential options in those mid rounds where maybe in previous years they hadn't really been available. Now, I do think there's kind of a fall off once you're getting into this B-Rob, Dobbins, Ramondre, Javonte range, but then I think it picks up. There's almost a 20 pick gap or 20 rank gap, and then you're getting into Scadabo, ETN, these round 10 picks that I think are really nice, and then getting into some of the later round options, the handcuffs. I do think you can build some really nice running back depth on ESPN. So now let's take a look at the wide receiver position. And I don't think there's anything crazy going on here in the first 2 rounds. Pretty in line, a couple spots higher on some guys, a few spots lower on some others. The one player that really sticks out in these early rounds, or the first 2, is Nico Collins. I have him as my 8th ranked player. I'd consider moving him back down to 9 with Matthew Stafford seemingly being healthy, but he's slipping to round 2, at least on the ESPN rankings. I got him in round 2 in one of the mock drafts I'm going to show you guys. So he really does stand out as the best wide receiver pick in the first 2 rounds. But then, like I mentioned earlier on, just do not love love these round 3 running backs. Now, you do have Ladd McConkey going round 3. I view him as like a, top 2 round wide receiver, so he's not included in this. But when we look at Devontae Adams, JSN, Terry McLaurin, Garrett Wilson, you can see for like Adams, JSN, Terry, pretty significantly lower on these guys compared to the ESPN rankings. Garrett Wilson still a little bit lower. And like I said, it just comes down to me prioritizing other positions. I'll take an elite tight end, whether that's, a Trey McBride, a George Kittle. I will take an elite quarterback, Lamar, Allen. Also fine with like Hurts, Daniels in this range. And then I'll also be choosing from like that, Cook, Hampton, Walker, Kyron kind of, tier of running backs, where I just feel like these wide receivers don't come with a ton of upside. Like maybe you could talk me into Devontae Adams as like the best option out of these guys, but like what's the ceiling projection for a JSN, a Terry McLaurin, a Garrett Wilson? I'm just not really seeing it. And so I feel like you can get somewhat similar production like 2, potentially 3 rounds later. So not a huge fan of those mid-round 3 wide receivers. One thing that really stood out to me here at the wide receiver position is that like the mid-round value on wide receiver is pretty much non-existent. Like you get into this round 5 range, and I just feel like all these wide receivers don't feel like great picks. Like I'm lower than ESPN on Metcalf, Moore, Rice, Flowers, Sutton, Ridley. Like some of these aren't extreme, but typically like ESPN, Yahoo, the mid-round wide receiver value is going to be really solid. I think it is on Yahoo. ESPN, just not really the case, where a lot of these wide receivers are kind of getting pushed up. But then I think once you're getting into like round 6 or later, that's where you see some of the values start to emerge, like a George Pickens, who I think is a great pick. I'll talk more in depth about the rookies a little bit later on, but Tet and Travis Hunter, I think these guys are like screaming values. You still have some interesting options, like a Jacoby Myers, a Chris Olave, Stephon Diggs, Matthew Golden. But then once you're getting into what is this, round 9, that's when I think the value at wide receiver is very apparent, where you have Juwan Jennings. I'm not even a Debo guy. Like I feel like I'm lower than consensus on Debo, and I still think he's a great pick. Ricky Pearsall, great pick. You're getting into like Michael Pittman, who I'm still not super high on, but I'm ahead of ESPN on him. Jaden Reed, Darnell Mooney, Josh Downs is like a screaming value to me. Emeka Egbuka here at pick 112. Now, I do expect him to move up a little bit. I'm actually going to move him up from this 73 ranking in my ranks, but like 112 is just insane. Even, a few weeks ago, that was still a crazy price tag, and they just continue to be values later on in the draft. Even some of these young guys like a Luther Burden, Kyle Williams, great late round darts that are, pretty much free on the ESPN platform. Now let's take a look at the quarterback position, and I feel like the quarterback values pretty closely resemble Yahoo. Maybe quarterbacks in like the mid rounds are pushed up even more, but I feel like the elite options, right? Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, these guys are actually values in my opinion. Daniels, Hurts going a little early for my liking. Like they have them ranked back to back to back to back. So you have Allen 28, Lamar 29, Daniels 30, Hurts 31. I do think there should be somewhat of a gap, but I'm interested in taking all 4 of those quarterbacks in the 3rd round. But after those 4, quarterback just gets way pushed up the draft board and way too high in my opinion. Like you have Joe Burrow, an early 4th round pick. Joe Burrow is an amazing quarterback, but he just doesn't have the rushing upside to pay off at that price tag. You have like round 6, early round 6, Patrick Mahomes and Baker Mayfield. Now, Mahomes could have some upside this season, but we have seen back-to-back years of him just being a non-factor at the quarterback position, where, yeah, like he's playable, but he's giving you like truly replaceable production as like a fringe QB1. Baker as like an early 6th round pick, I just think that's crazy. So you can see like I'm pretty out on all of these quarterback values. Just like I talked about in the Yahoo video, I'm totally fine, or if I don't get one of these elite options, I'm just going to wait at quarterback, and whoever like the draft room deems to be the quarterback 15, the quarterback 16, I'm fine just drafting whatever quarterback slips. So whether that's a Justin Fields, a Drake May, a Jordan Love, Goff, McCarthy, like I'm fine taking any of those dudes. I'm just not going to be reaching for some of these other options and missing out on value at other positions. And then the final position here, the tight end spot, I'm really in on these elite options. So Brock Bowers, I think, is a really nice value, pretty much in line on Trey McBride, but the fact that I'm kind of lower on some of the other options, I think makes him a more appealing pick. George Kittle's ADP is very weird. On Yahoo, him and Trey McBride go like back to back. On ESPN, you have George Kittle as like an early to mid round 4 pick, which I just think is an amazing value. Then you start to get into some gross prices, not super in on Laporta, Hawkinson, Kelsey and Joku. I think Andrews, Ingram, pretty fairly ranked. Tucker Kraft, too high in my opinion. The two rookie tight ends, Colston Loveland, Tyler Warren, I think both guys have really strong opportunities to be productive in year one, and I think they are both going way too low. And that does transition us well into talking about the rookies, because I think pretty much across the board, rookies are just a really strong value on ESPN. We already talked about the wide receivers, right? Like Tet McMillan, Travis Hunter, both screaming values going in round 6. We know these round 1 rookies come with a ton of upside. You had guys like Ladd McConkey, BTJ last year. I have the ADP somewhere here. Yeah, I talked about these guys in last year's video. Ladd McConkey went in round 10, was the wide receiver 46. BTJ went in round 12 as the wide receiver 51. And those were like, second half of round 1, early round 2 wide receiver prospects. You have Tet McMillan and Travis Hunter, both top 10 picks. They should not be going in round 6. RJ Harvey, screaming value. Hampton, Henderson have been moving up, but I still think their values at where they're ranked. There's like, 2 players here that I'm lower on than consensus. One is Ashton Genty, who I deem as an early round 2 pick. He goes late round 1, nothing crazy there. And then Quinshawn Judkins, who I'm one spot lower on. You have Caleb Johnson, who I'm slightly ahead of consensus or slightly ahead of ESPN, and then Matthew Golden, who I don't know about being a screaming value. But other than that, just across the board, guys that I'm 10 spots higher on in my personal rankings, I really don't get the disconnect here between Matthew Golden being ranked here at 78 per ESPN compared to Emeka Egbuka being at 112. I think Egbuka is just a straight up better prospect. Now, I do think Golden could have an easier opportunity to get on the field, but the overall gap there is just way too wide. And we know these young players, these rookies, they might not have a super high floor, but they can give you that league-winning upside. And even when we're getting later on in drafts, just taking shots at ambiguous backfields with a Cam Scatterbo, a Jaden Blue, a Bashal Tootin, some of these young wide receivers, a Luther Burden, Kyle Williams, have to imagine Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is definitely going to rise in their rankings once they update them, but still might end up being too low because that's just kind of what happens here with these rookie options. So these are some basic guidelines I'm putting out here that, should be loosely followed, or I think would help if they were followed loosely. I'm very confident going best player available early on ESPN. On Yahoo, I talked more about prioritizing running back, where if you go super wide receiver heavy, even if they're best player available, you're really going to get put in a locker at the running back position. I just don't think that's the case this year on ESPN, where if the value's there at wide receiver, there's going to be fine options in the middle rounds at the running back spot. Now, I still do want to get 2 running backs through round 6, because round 7 is where you start to kind of hit that wall at running back. But I don't think it needs to be super forced early on like it might be in Yahoo. At the quarterback position, I'm either going elite option or late round quarterback. So I'm getting, a Lamar, a Josh Allen, maybe a Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels. And unless there's some sort of massive faller, then I'm just going to wait and take, a Fields, a Drake May, a Jared Goff, guys like that. I'm not going to reach for one of these mid-round guys. So I'm getting in early, or I'm just punting the position and I'm waiting. And then I'm targeting rookies. This is also something I talked about in the Yahoo video, extreme values. I think if you're drafting 3, 4, 5 rookies, you are building a team that has a ton of upside this year. And so now let's dive into a couple of the mock drafts. Kind of apologize, said the same thing in the Yahoo video, but the overall draft board isn't super visually appealing and it's kind of small, but we're doing our best here. So still wanted to show, all the picks. You actually do get the full draft board. So this is from the 103 spot. I went best player available, like I talked about, went Jahmyr Gibbs in round 1. Round 2, once again, my best option on the board was Brock Bowers. I do like going elite tight end. There are still certain guys at the tight end position that I'm in on in the mid rounds, and I also like some of those late round rookies. So don't have a super strong opinion on the tight end position. I just think there's some decent value throughout the entire draft. Then in round 3, I go with T. Higgins. Late round 4, I get Xavier Worthy. Now, if this was Yahoo, I might have forced a Breece Hall pick here at the 410 just to make sure I had one of those running backs locked down. I didn't really feel the need to do it here on ESPN because I could have had Breece Hall. I also would have been fine with an RJ Harvey pick, who ended up going early round 6, pretty much a round later. I would have been fine with either of those running backs. I did want one of them. I ended up getting Breece Hall here at the 503. I have him and RJ Harvey pretty close in my rankings. If you think this team is better with RJ Harvey, I'm fine with that. Then I hammer wide receiver round 6, round 7, round 8, round 9. This 6-7 turn of getting Tet McMillan and Travis Hunter is like my dream 6-7 turn. Like, this is just amazing value in my opinion. And then also like the wide receiver value we get at the 8-9 turn where we get Ricky Pearsall and Josh Downs. Also should have mentioned this. This is PPR scoring and then like the standard ESPN roster setup, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 flex spot. Then we hit up running back, our RB3 being Cam Scatterbo. This is kind of like after that grosser tier of like Dobbins, Ramondre, guys like that. So we get Cam Scatterbo late round 10. We hit up quarterback for the first time. See, I waited, went round 11, got Drake May, someone who I feel totally fine with starting in week 1. We get him on the roster. Round 12, I go with Bashal Tutin, another solid like rookie running back depth option. Then in round 13, I went with Trevor Lawrence. I don't think it was mandatory to take a second quarterback option, but we did wait. I do think, both of these quarterbacks could be solid options. We do have Travis Hunter, so we have that stack with Trevor Lawrence. I'm fine getting 2 of these guys. I think both could be playable this season. And then our final position player is Will Shipley. Then we close it out with Cameron Dicker, Cardinals defense. So when we look at this starting lineup, obviously not going to be the strongest at the quarterback position, but if we're, waiting at the spot, I'm totally fine with Drake May. Trevor Lawrence, I like our running back 1 with Jahmyr Gibbs. Even though I am getting lower on Breece Hall, I still think he's a very serviceable RB2 option. Wide receivers, T. Higgins, Xavier Worthy, Tet McMillan with Travis Hunter, Ricky Pearsall, Josh Downs, all as depth options. Like, I think our wide receiver depth is really, really strong. Then we go with Brock Bowers at the tight end position. Running backs, we go Cam Scatterbo, Bashal Tutin, and then Will Shipley for our bench. I think maybe you could make the case that this was like a little bit overkill on the wide receiver position where we had like 6 wideouts through 9 rounds. Like, maybe this Downs, Pearsall pick could have been a running back. I would say I definitely would have considered Travis Etienne if he fell to us here at like the 8-9 turn. But I do think we're just going to kill the flex with the wide receiver position. We are drafting some younger options, so maybe it takes them a little bit to kind of get going, and I still think we have like solid production early on in the season. So I feel good about this roster. Like I talked about, went balanced early on, just taking my best player available, and I think it, ended up with a pretty solid roster. Then with the second and final mock draft here, this is going to be from the 109, and this is a really nice like 1-2 turn for us. This is a really nice start. I didn't feel the need to force running back. I went Malik Neighbors, Nico Collins. That 109 spot for me is pretty interchangeable between Neighbors and Nico Collins, but the fact that I thought I had a chance to get Nico Collins to fall to me is why I ended up siding with Malik Neighbors, and then luckily enough, we do get Nico Collins here at the 204, but I also would have been totally fine if this was a Derrick Henry pick, a Devon Achane pick, BTJ could potentially fall. Wouldn't have hated Brock Bowers at this spot either, but, kind of glad we got some diversity because we did take him in that first mock draft. And then, like I said, we don't need to force running back because there's going to be solid options available in round 3 into round 4. We actually hammer back-to-back rookie running backs. We go with Amarion Hampton and Travion Henderson. Now, I think some people overall just might not like building a team with all these rookies because there's a lot of uncertainty. These aren't proven assets. The way that I kind of look at it is only one person wins the league, right? So you're not aiming to have like a mid-level outcome or slightly above average. If only one person's winning, I'm going to take some swings. Maybe these guys don't pan out, but I think when you're looking at some of the other guys being drafted in a similar range, I just feel like these players come with a lot of upside. And I also think both Hampton and Henderson are going to be really solid early season plays. I still think they're going to be players who peak later on in the year, but I don't think this is a spot where like these guys are unplayable and we're just going to have a disgusting running back room in week 1. Like, I think we'll be fine, can weather the early storm. And then this is a team that's really going to peak down the stretch. In round 5, 6, 7, hit up wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. We go George Pickens, Travis Hunter again, and then Chris Olave. This round 7 pick, I feel like I could have gone, a few different directions. The Olave pick didn't feel super necessary, but he was my best player available. This could have been like an Evan Ingram spot, but it was like, do I want to go Ingram here or get one of the rookies a couple rounds later? I opted to go with Chris Olave, and then you can see we did get a solid tight end later on. Round 8 went with Kyler Murray. This was also a spot where I considered like an Emeka Egbuka pick. I think in my next rankings update, I might actually move Egbuka ahead of Chris Olave. Not, completely sold on that, but I think it's possible. End up going with Kyler Murray here, get our quarterback position. Like I talked about, I'm typically aiming for early or late round quarterback. This was a unique spot where Kyler Murray was going a little bit after his ESPN ranking. I do like him at the quarterback position. Didn't want to like fully wait on quarterback and tight end, so we lock him in here to be our quarterback 1. Then we get the rookie Colston Loveland to be our tight end 1. Also wanted to provide some depth at the tight end position because don't know how productive he's going to be right away. So I got Hunter Henry in round 12. Round 10, 11, I really like the value got at running back. Round 10, Travis Etienne is crazy. I'm not even like a huge Travis Etienne guy. I really like Bashal Tootin. I think he is going to be relevant in the second half of the season. But like Etienne's going to be startable in week 1. And to get him in round 10, I just think is a really nice pick, especially on a team where maybe you have these rookies peaking in the second half. Etienne might kind of front load his production, which kind of aligns with our overall setup here. Then Zach Charbonnet, kind of an expensive handcuff, but this is a cheaper price tag for him. If anything happens to Kenneth Walker, we know Walker's been banged up pretty consistently. Zach Charbonnet just steps in and is an automatic running back 1. Like I mentioned, got that tight end depth with Hunter Henry. And then we close it out with Ray Davis and Will Shipley, more of like pure handcuffs at the running back position. So I feel good with Kyler as our quarterback 1. 2 rookie running backs with Hampton Henderson. Wide receiver room really strong with Malik Neighbors, Nico Collins, George Pickens in the flex, with then Travis Hunter and Chris Olave as depth options. And then Colston Loveland at the tight end spot. Didn't mention went Butker Cardinals for a defense kicker. I'm always waiting until the last 2 rounds to get those positions. I'm always streaming defenses. I'm not trying to reach for some defense that I think is going to be, solid throughout the entire season. I'm just streaming week to week, and then kicker, just targeting a good kicker on a good offense. So that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. Like I said, I think the ESPN ADP is pretty sharp, but there's still some areas you can exploit it. You don't really need to force things early on, and I think you can build some really nice rosters. So if this video helped you out, do me a huge favor, hit the like button and subscribe. Questions, comments, feel free to drop them down below. When you guys do your drafts, drop the rosters down below. Would love to take a look at them. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.